recording. Hi, this is Dr. Cheryl Field-Smith with the Black Family Home Educator and Scholars Group. This is a coffee talk about future homeschool research related to Black families. We have today 4 people who are in colleges around the country, and they are doing research on Black homeschooling. So get your cup of coffee and join us. All right. My first question is, who are you? Tell the people who you are, what university you represent, and where you are, like when do you expect to graduate? Oh, we'll start with Carla. Sorry.
Sure. So my name is Carla Welborn. I'm a Detroit native. I'm currently studying at Vanderbilt University in the Leadership Policy and Organizations Department. I just finished my first year, so I will not be graduating for some time, but excited to continue looking into scholarship around Black homeschoolers and further my research.
Courtney?
Hi, my name is Courtney Douglas. I just finished my 3rd year at the University of Maryland, College Park in the Minority and Urban Education program. And I live in Washington, D.C. I've been here for quite some time. I'm a former teacher in D.C. public schools. And so my work looks a little bit at Black homeschooling, but primarily at Black unschooling. And so I'm excited to be here and to get to talk to you all.
Yes, it's nice to have somebody looking at unschooling. Matthew.
Hello everyone, so I'm Matthew Rankin, a rising 6th year grad student at the Department of Sociology at Emory University here in Atlanta, Georgia. And like I said, my dissertation actually focuses on Black homeschooling, more so from the vantage point of the parents. I'm really interviewing mothers and fathers just to kind of gather an idea as to how the homeschooling experience is imagined and how it's voiced, through their lenses and or respective lenses. And yeah, it's been a wild ride so far, but I'm looking forward to more adventure, I'll say that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what you find with Black fathers. We don't hear from them much in the literature, so that's such a wonderful contribution to have. And Jamila.
Hi, so my name is Jamila Hawkins, and I am a middle grades education major, undergraduate student at Albany State University, and I will be graduating in fall 2021 of December. And my research, I do a lot of research on Black homeschooling families and the rise of African-American homeschoolers.
Yes, it's so nice to have an HBCU represented. I'm a graduate of an HBCU, so really glad that you're here, Jamila. Jamila, now you are a representative of undergraduate studies, and you were able to do research in your undergraduate program. So how did that come about? Because that's a little bit unusual.
Well, it all started when COVID, like literally in the midst of COVID, I'm an intern at the Center for Educational Opportunities. And we were having a summer internship during the summer last year. And I was given the opportunity to pick a topic that I wanted to write research on. And out of all the topics given, the rise of African-American homeschoolers, I don't know why it just stood out to me. And so it was something I always wondered. And I've always looked at homeschooling as something that more of the Caucasian population would, be more prevalent to do. But I never thought about African-American actually homeschooling their children. And so I was intrigued and I wanted to know, why do African-Americans homeschool their children? And once I started to do my research and actually build my literature review, it was so captivating. Like I would be going to sleep thinking about all these articles and these stories that I read. I'm just like, wow, I never knew this. And it helped me understand as a teacher candidate that there are more sides to the story. And so with that research, it planted a seed for me to want to know more. And that's where it all started. I don't want to give too much information yet.
No, that's really good. So those internship opportunities are really important in undergrad and getting your master's and even in your PhD program. If you have an opportunity for internships, then you might be able to do some research too, which actually will give you a leg up when you go to grad school. I'm just assuming you're going.
Yes,
And if you
ma'am.
want to come to UGA and work with me, please.
I don't know who I heard her claim it. She said future candidate.
Please, please come. But that's a good segue into Carla, Courtney, and Matthew. What sparked your interest in doing research on Black homeschooling as well? Whoever wants to go first.
I can kick us off. I was interested in Black homeschool families because I'm a part of a Black homeschool family.
Awesome.
The running joke in our family is that we've been to every type of school you could imagine. So I went to public school, private school, Catholic school, Christian school, community college, private college, public. I mean, I've gone to all of these different types of schools, but it was, my parents were really dedicated to the public school system in Detroit, but we had challenges. There was a lot of policing of my brother's behavior while we were in school, a lot of just kind of weird things happening in terms of like my parents' ability to be involved. It was just a challenge in just about every type of school they went to or they sent us to. And so I was homeschooled from about 4th grade up until 9th grade. And then I did some community college and kind of entered into a lot more of a hybrid homeschool space where we did some community college classes, some learning at home, some co-op classes, and then some classes at a local high school. And so what I realized from that experience is that my understanding of the level of control that parents have in their child's educational experiences was very different than my peers, especially when I was in college. Even my understanding of my own freedom of choice in my body, my space, my decisions, all of that was very different because I grew up I was in a much freer educational environment. And I didn't understand that at the time. And so a lot of my curiosities around homeschooling are just to what extent do Black parents in particular have power over their child's educational experiences? What power do they perceive that they have? What power do they actually have? And how does that kind of play with or is associated with the educational experiences that their children have? So my interest in this work is very much because of my own experiences.
Sounds like you have a story you could write too about your experiences, you know, a really good ethnography.
It would be funny because I used to also protest around the house with signs because I wanted to go back to school because I felt like they had taken me away from all my friends. So I had like signs that like take me back to school and my parents just ignored me. I'm kind of glad they did. But.
It would be good to read that perspective from somebody who grew up, you know, that would be really good. Okay, Matthew, Courtney, what got you interested in researching Black homeschooling?
Courtney, the floor is yours.
Okay. Yeah, so like I said, I actually, I came to DC with a different major and then got into teaching through like an alternative certification program, was sort of like thrown into DC public school. So I was a high school teacher teaching secondary special education. And so from my experiences in the classroom, and then I was there for a little bit and then I left primarily in a Title I school. And so I left there and then was doing work with youth in the foster care system as well as the juvenile justice system, working with teen parents and then youth with like barriers to employment. So a lot of like these youth serving systems that always kind of linked back to education, but always seemed like education seemed to be the core problem of sort of like how or why they weren't able to kind of move forward in their lives. And so after kind of, I knew that like pursuing a PhD was like something kind of in the back of my mind, but I always was like, you know what, I'm gonna just wait till it feels right. So I like actually feel like it's gonna be meaningful. And so once I started kind of like getting that itch again, it was like, okay, I know that I don't want to spend my time sort of like investing, I guess, or building systems that I see like just aren't working for our kids. And so just in all of the spaces that I had experienced and been in, and even sort of seeing, you know, over, you know, a decade, like where the outcomes were of these students over time, it was just like, I think we need something else. I think there's something, you know, better. And I didn't know any Black homeschoolers at all, whether growing up or sort of even when I started to kind of ask these questions. But I remembered some organization that a graduate student had like shared with us when I was in my master's program at George Washington. And she talked about like this idea that like homework was unnecessary. And I was like, what? I'm a teacher. Like, you're a teacher. How could that even be, possible? And so she connected it to this book, and then that was connected to this organization, the Alternative Education Resource Organization. And so I started going to their conferences, and it was like, a lot of white people and like these very free ideas around like progressive education and like Sudbury schools and like free schools and democratic schools. And it was like, whoa, first of all, I've like never heard about any of this. And then I was there and like nobody looked like me at this conference. And so I was listening to these panels of these different youth who were like experiencing these things. I was like, this sounds just so free and so liberating. And like, there's no Black people here. And so it was like, I that kind of interrogation of like, why isn't that, the case? How come that's not happening? And so the next year I went to the conference, Akilah Richards spoke. And so she does work around Black unschooling and just Black liberation connected to unschooling. And so that's really sort of what really frames and I think shapes kind of like how I think about these things and why. And it really just still goes back to sort of my experiences, I think, in the classroom and just seeing kids who are unhappy and not having other opportunities. And I feel like parents are like frustrated, but don't always understand like what their other options are.
Good point. Matthew?
Okay, so I first got into homeschooling. I'll never forget it. My family and I, we were, so this happened during the last year of my stint as an at-home dad. I had the fortunate opportunity to be at home with my son for 3 years after he was born. And so I think about years in terms of semesters, right, or academic years. And so this is the spring semester of my last year, or my third year. And we were on vacation, we were riding around, and there was an NPR segment on, and they were talking about the rise of Black homeschoolers. And I just remember the segment, just talking, hearing the speaker talk about, many of the issues that I guess nowadays you could say are commonplace, right? The issues with the public education system, how teachers treat the students. And there was a focus more so on the boys, but just hearing the parents talk about, look, parents are just fed up. They were like, I need to get out of this system, and I want my kids to be happier and enjoy education more. And so that happened in the spring of 2016. I'm going to enroll in the fall for my first year of grad school. I didn't know that I was going to tackle this topic. I didn't say to myself, yeah, this is going to be it, right? But I did sort of earmark it and tucked it away. I said, I want to come back to this at some point in time. And lo and behold, when it came time for, the dissertation proposal and all of these things, I'm sort of racking my brain and going through all the things that really, really speak to me, right? If you're going to do a dissertation, you're going to want to have something that's going to just hold you and really, really keep you motivated. And so, I came back to what I know and what I enjoy is education. And I wanted to explore Black homeschooling a little bit more in depth. And more specifically, I'm interested in how parents go about articulating the motivations for homeschooling, how to go about articulating their choices for curriculum, how to go about actually doing the teaching. What do they physically do in the household to teach a given subject or concept? And I'm really interested in how mothers and fathers go about this. As Dr. Field Smith said before, fathers, they're maybe, when they're mentioned in the literature, it's more so in a supportive role. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that in any sort of diminishing way. It's just that they play more of a supportive role. It is a very, very much, mothers are at the helm. And so I want to put both voices at the fore of this research and really, really have a comparative 360 view of what homeschooling looks like through the vantage point of the parents and how to go about creating this, rising enterprise in our country.
Wow, it's really good. Well, we are in an era of the rise of homeschooling among Black families. It actually increased during the pandemic among Black families fivefold, according to the recent census data. So that's amazing. We went from 3.4% to like something like 16.1% in a really short period of time. A lot of that is because of the pandemic. But what have you learned in what you've read about Black homeschooling, and why is this work so important that we document what's happening right now? Anybody?
Can I hop in? Okay. I'm gonna somewhat piggyback off a point that Carla mentioned earlier about walking around the house with her posters or her, her signs protesting. But, I say that in a sort of tongue-in-cheek way, but no, but seriously, I come to see homeschooling, and the literature says it too. In many ways, I feel like it is a revolutionary act, to literally just take your children's or your family's educational trajectory in your hands and say, we are going to do this. And it's a family commitment. That's what I've learned. I've learned that homeschooling is a family-wide commitment, whether even if it's within an immediate family, but it takes sacrifices for many people in terms of income, in terms of time, energy, and the kids have to buy into it, obviously. And so I've learned that it takes so many different forms, and that all the parents, they all say to me, I sort of ask them for their parting shots after our interviews, and so many of them said the same thing. They would just say, look, one parent, she put it best. She goes, my gumbo is not going to taste like anybody else's gumbo, right? You're going to have all these different ingredients. I could tell you what I'm putting in mine, and it's still, yours will not taste like mine. And so how everyone's homeschooling endeavor looks different, and you need to respect it and understand that there's nuance in this. And, I really do see homeschooling as a revolutionary form of living, especially as we move forward and thinking about all the different ways. If you think about it in sort of socio-political context, voting restrictions, right? And, just different, and policing, and all these different things that are just sort of squeezing down on Black people and Black communities and families. And education, it has to be that light that breaks through. That's what I see it as. Whether or not, I don't know if I want to get on that sort of high horse, so to speak, or sort of speak in that tone, but I just really do feel like this could be a form of revolution that we're seeing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I could jump off of that, Matthew, I agree. I was thinking while you were talking about Bianca Baldridge at Wisconsin, and how she kind of talked about how part of the motivation behind her interest in alternative educational spaces is this idea that schools were not built for Black youth. And so this constant butting up against the wall, trying to turn this structure that was not designed to benefit our children into something that actually not only educates them, but helps them thrive, is a challenging question. It's not a question that should be avoided or given up, but it is also important for us to explore what are alternative educational spaces for our youth that are designed to help them thrive. We should at least be exploring and understanding them. And so it's been an interesting experience for me to put what I'm reading in the literature over this past year and compare it with what I've been seeing in practice over a couple decades. I have a lot of family members that homeschool. I know a lot of homeschool communities in Detroit. And so there's even during the pandemic, a good friend of mine created a homeschool network of Black families, intentionally resisting the lack of communication that was coming out of their public school system about what their COVID-19 plans would be. They were really slow in communicating it. And we all understand schools had a major challenge, but she and another group of Black families then decided, well, we have other options. And so they created their own community to begin this homeschooling co-op that's still going, and they plan to keep it going even past the pandemic. And so I think a part of this, what these themes of resistance, and Matthew, what you were saying about this revolutionary act, what inspires me about this work is that it is this you said I had 5 options. I actually have way more than that. And this is what I'm seeing Black parents do, right? I have way more options than what you've told me I have. And that's what the literature is showing too. We can resist the options that are put in front of us and choose our own path for our children if we want to.
Wow. Jamila, go ahead.
To piggyback off of what Matthew and Carla said, it's the way I look at homeschooling and why it's so important. The word that comes to me when I think about Black homeschooling is the word revelation. And all of that is just revealing the truth. So homeschooling allows families to reveal the truth about education, because when you go to public school and in private school and even charter schools, they're all different schoolings, but like Courtney said, you can be involved and you can be in the school and teaching and still not know all the other options or all the other ways that a child can be educated, because we all know that children are not one size fit all. You know, children learn different ways, and children are different. They have different upbringings and different backgrounds, especially when you look at the Black child versus any other child in different culture. We're not treated the same because we are not the same, you know, as anyone else. And so when I think about homeschooling, I think about revealing the truth and pulling back that onion and the different layers that come with education, that it's not just one route to receive just one destination. And there isn't one destination. There are multiple routes that a child can take. Even with the whole, you know, misconception that every child has to go to go to college. I don't believe personally that every child has to go to college, because there are different routes you can still be successful. And so in high school or in public schooling, they're always telling us that we need to prep for college. We need to make sure we have our PSATs. We need to make sure we have our SATs, our ACTs. And these are systems that are keeping African Americans held back based off of a standardized test score. And so homeschooling is just allowing families and children to break through those barriers and break through that gap, that glass ceiling that says that you can only go this level by going this way.
The future leaders of America. Yes, yes, yes. Courtney, anything that you want to say about the importance and maybe what you've learned a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, and I just, I'm so glad to be here.
I'm glad you're all here too.
Yeah. No, it's just really affirming, I think, because a lot of times I kind of feel like I'm the only person in my space, even though, I'm with colleagues who, we're all kind of like thinking about, just critical ways that we can think about education in Black people, but like kind of this particular vein is a little bit different. And so even among my professors are sort of like, okay, like you're kind of in this lane over here. But I agree with what everyone has said. I think what I'll just add is really thinking about sort of like the historical perspective. And so part of what I see in the literature and some of the work that I've done is really sort of helping to make that connection between like, this isn't new for us. Like we've been doing this, and even just that idea that these places weren't built for us. They weren't designed for us. They did not have us in mind. We were intentionally excluded. And so we've always had to find our own. We've always had to build our own, to make our own, to find our own ways. And so for me, these themes are connected directly to slavery as well as to freedom. And I think when you think about like by any means necessary, like we want all of the options. And it's like, yes, there's people who have to do that education reform work, but then there's also people who are going to say like, there's another means by which, we're gonna pursue freedom. And I think to not take it lightly that like we're fighting for our lives, and when you look at what's happening to Black children in schools, whether that's physically, emotionally, whether that's, for their safety, whether that's for their mental health, it's like, no, we're actually still fighting that. Like I'm in this PhD program, I'm having conversations about, things that happened to me in middle school that like just brought so much shame around Blackness that I'm like, no, this is trauma. Like, and so when we think about these things, even just like the education thread is like one thing, but it's like, this is connected to like saving our own lives. And so for those reasons, I'm always going to be a proponent. And I think there's so much that can just be learned through these things.
Yeah. Wow.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Go ahead.
I've been dying to ask you this since you brought it up, but I didn't. But I feel like it's appropriate based on what you just said. But you talked about being interested in unschooling, and I'm not as familiar with the literature on unschooling, but I feel like it's related to what you just said. Could you share? Is it okay if she shares a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Thanks. So as simply as I can. So unschooling is thinking about self-directed learning, basically. So the way that I kind of explain it to people is like, if you understand homeschooling, then think about homeschooling without curriculum. So there's not grades, there's not tests, there's not, we're going to learn this on these days. It's literally like natural, organic, sort of self-directed and like child-led and child-driven. And so, yeah, it is very free. So I could pause there because I don't know if there's other parts of that you're curious about, but I could say a lot, but I will.
I could tell you that when I first started doing homeschool research, it was in like 2006 was the first time I did a study. And when I asked people to identify whether they were unschoolers or if they were more just regular schoolers, African Americans, they were uneasy with identifying as unschoolers. And part of the reason is they didn't think that they thought they had to be structured, right? And now I see there's more freedom. People are self-identifying more and more as unschoolers. What was unusual was when I then asked about individually about how they did their homeschooling, there was a lot of elements of unschooling, following the children's interest, using those interests as the curriculum, hands-on learning. I was like, wow, they're not identifying this way, but they are approaching it this way. There was a fear of that label, but I'm so grateful to see that we're moving away from that fear more and more.
Yeah. Same.
Could I speak to that a little bit too?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, with the parents I've spoken to thus far, along those lines, right? Those three sort of bullet points, if you will, in terms of, homeschooling, unschooling, freedom, all of these things. And, there are some parents who would voice, even they're as homeschooling parents, whether they're sort of new to the game or they're veterans, some would voice not outright disdain, but they were sort of critical of unschooling. And when I would ask why or what's that, they would say, well, and it reminds me just the idea of sort of like the matrix, right? This cage you're in. It's like you want to be free. We do, so many families homeschool to remove their kids from the system and sort of forge their own path. However, right, there's this but there where it's like, okay, I want to homeschool. I don't want to unschool because remember, my children are Black. They're going to need to have X amount of credentials if they're going to go out into this world, right? And so it's like, it's sort of this tug and pull where it's like, no matter how free you want to get, there's always something there, or there's always this larger structure that's there that is checking you or making you feel as though you have to or requiring this of you. And so it really, and I may even want to delve more so into that dynamic, as I sort of go through the research, but this idea of the tug and pull of freedom, right? And the idea there's so many different systems in place that either remind you or check you and let you know that you can be free, but how far or to what extent can you be free? So
yeah, that's really powerful. I think it goes back to what Courtney was saying in terms of our history. I often try to figure out what it would have been like to be a social studies teacher, a Black social studies teacher of Black children during the Jim Crow era. So you're teaching these children about democracy, and you step out your door and it's anything but democracy in your life. But yet those are the teachers who somehow inspired our Martin Luther King and all the leaders that led to the civil rights era. So they did something amazing that I think is akin to what might be happening in Black homeschooling today for all children, because we're not free yet either completely. But in order to get your child to overcome those things that tell you supposedly those invisible things, Dr. Cynthia Dillard would tell us that we need to unlearn what we have been taught to forget, right? We've been taught to forget who we were, back when we were on the continent and all of our achievements back then. And so of course we can teach our own kids, but those limits that are on us, somehow we do need to break free from that.
For saying unlearn, it's so funny because I remember in my 10th grade year of high school, I had a teacher that taught us everything that the curriculum was supposed to teach us, and we learned everything book by book, chapter by chapter, and then towards like the end of the semester, we had a couple of weeks left. We literally unlearned everything that, you know, we were taught, and we were taught how everything started in Africa. So it's like he
wow.
that time to make sure that I'm going to save myself by doing my job, but I'm going to save you guys by telling y'all the truth. And I didn't understand how valuable that was until this moment right now.
Oh, wow.
Because at first I was just thinking like, okay, well, this is interesting. Like, you know, I've never had a class like this before. And even as I go back and think about just certain things that we learned, I was grateful for it because I would have never known. But as we're talking about unlearning, and as we're talking about what those teachers were actually teaching the Malcolm X's or Martin Luther King's, maybe they were doing a little bit of that during those revolutionary years. Maybe they were taking time out to teach them what the curriculum or the standards were, but throwing in those golden nuggets of life lessons and actually helping them understand about who they are.
And what they're capable of, because they certainly came out of those schools and changed the world. So yeah, definitely, definitely. So let me, I'm curious about what you plan to do when you get your degrees and finish this, you know, those of you that are working on dissertations on Black homeschooling. Do you know, what challenges do you think there are in trying to continue the work? You know, do you want to be in academia, or is there someplace else that you want to be? What are you going to do with this great knowledge that you get?
Who's up? Who's up first? Oh man, sure. I'll go for it.
You're the closest to finishing.
I know, right? It's like not it, right? I mean, gosh, there's that question is definitely been sort of like an existential question. And you know, so much of this work and so much of what I've learned, you know, it becomes a part of you. And, you know, just for the record, you know, not only am I, you know, closing towards the end of this program, but, you know, my wife and I, you know, we're homeschooling our kids, right? And so that balance in and of itself is challenging.
Okay.
And then we think about, okay, so, you know, what's next? Well, how do you, and all I know is while, you know, the academy is something that is a viable option, right? I mean, the idea of what Black professors meant to me when I was coming up, you know, in undergrad and in grad school, you know, the idea of, and I can't deny it. I mean, even as a grad school student, being able to teach your own class, there's a certain rush that comes from that, being up there and just talking to different people and young minds and just collaborating and back and forth. There's just, like, you cannot deny that there's a joy to that. And at the same time, and just working with other, you know, working with colleagues. At the same time, there's so much joy in me teaching my own children different things. You know, we spent the past several weeks talking about ancient Egypt, and now we want to move on to the Kushites and things, and how those two civilizations, you know, connected. But just the idea of curating that experience for your children, and in many ways, you know, parents are the first teachers, but I think about, it's almost like you have these dreams, right? You know, the idea of my kids being able to say one day, you know, my father taught me, or you know, my mommy taught me this, you know, and just to have that also pulls me very, very strongly. And so in many ways, I guess I'm at sort of a crossroads here. You know, I don't know, I'm not going to say exactly what it's going to be, but was that education in one shape or form will be a thread that I follow. So that, you know, once you sort of cross that threshold, you can't go back.
Yeah, that's good. Anyone else? I know it might seem far off, but it's always good to have an idea of where you're headed, even if it might shift later. You know, have you thought about what you want to do with the work that you complete?
I could share, because I've been thinking about this a lot, not with answers, but probably more with questions. And so I think I do at least want to try the academic route for a bit, and let's kind of see how that goes. It's funny because, you know, my work is is so much about like freedom and like the antithesis of school. And then like the academy is the, direct opposite. And it's like, these things don't really go together, but also, just kind of from talking to professors and even you, I think the autonomy that you actually have within that role to kind of do and shape the things that you want is really attractive to me. But then even, and maybe mostly since being a grad student, I think there's still the pull and the tension of like I miss being around kids. Like I miss being around young people. I miss like the energy and the passion of sort of like what in some ways schools are designed to kind of like bring, but also, after school programs or just like youth programs generally. And so there's always a tension of like, well, I don't know how I do this and sort of like have my feet on the ground and sort of really be among the people. Because I think there's a lot of ways where I'm like, even to your question, Carla, about like the literature about like unschooling, it's like, it doesn't really exist. Like I'm hoping to kind of like help that come forward, but it's like, it's on social media, it's in like people's personal stories, it's in books, and it's like among families who are living it. And I think I want to still be very connected to that work and to, the young people who are actually, living and experiencing it. And so in part, I'm hoping maybe that, something like participatory action studies will like allow me to sort of make some of those, bridges. But yeah, I think I always want to find myself among the people who are doing it more than just kind of in the ivory tower.
So obviously I'm very brand new to the world of academia, so I have given this a little bit of thought, but not a ton. My background is practice, so I taught for a few years and then helped lead a nonprofit for the last 5 years before I came into school. And so I think I'll always just kind of have like the need for an applied, like an applied focus to my work. So I'm hoping right now to be able to do that through academia because of the freedom that would allow for research interests, or I'm hoping the freedom that it would allow for pursuing the research interests that I myself would like to pursue. But I'm similar to what you both were saying. I'm pretty flexible. My overall goal is that whatever I'm doing would be able to pair theory and also like applied action in a way that I think that for me would be meaningful for the communities. I know a lot of people can do research and know that someone else is going to pick it up and run with it in the applied world. I would like to at least see the run happen in order to feel internal satisfaction. So I'm still kind of grappling with what that means for myself, but yeah, either academia or even a think tank that is interested in like an Andre Perry, someone that's able to like kind of be an advocate for Black families and Black people from a policy bend. So something like that.
Awesome.
I would say that I feel as like all of you all feel, just on a different level, because I haven't got my degree yet. So with me, I do plan on going to graduate school and getting my PhD. That is a goal of mine, and it's not something that I want to sit on. It's not something I want to wait a gap year. I do want to start working on that as soon as I can. And so that's something that is like an action item for right now. Of course, I'm going to be teaching once I do graduate. And I was literally talking to myself yesterday about, okay, so I'm learning two different things. I'm learning about the standard teacher way, and then I'm also learning about homeschooling, which they don't really connect. I mean, it's all for the students, yes, but it's different. And so I guess I'm just trying to understand where I can best fit, even if I'm just teaching for a season, just to, get my feet wet and try to understand how this goes, because I don't have any children yet. So I don't really know. I really don't know exactly where this is going to lead me. I know that I like research. I know that it's become a passion of mine to research Black homeschooling. I know that I'm researching it so much that I may, when I do have children, homeschool them. So it's different. It's a lot, but it's a good problem. It's a good problem because there are a lot of options. And I know that wherever I go, that's where I'm supposed to be. Even if it's different seasons, like if I'm in the school system, then that's where I need to be for them. If I'm, an advocate for Black homeschooling, then that's where I need to be. Like, I know wherever I end up, walking, I will be beneficial and I will be used for the purpose intended at that time, but I just don't know where I'm going to be at.
No worries. You have time. You have time. Oh my gosh, this has been absolutely amazing. I am so, so grateful to have such intelligent, insightful people coming into the field of Black homeschool research. You have so much to add to it. I do want to say, I heard you, Courtney and Carla, when you talked about wanting that connection between the research and the practice. And I think when I think about it, that's why we formed the Black Family Home Educator and Scholars Group, because we have homeschool practitioners, but we have scholars there too. And we're hoping that the two can, have some synergy together and inform one another, right, on the work. We are going to have a Black Homeschool Research Conference in October, and I'm so excited about that. And we will just focus on Black homeschool research. The website is almost finished. It should be another week or two. And I'll be sending the email to you all to submit your proposals. And it's a different type of conference. We want people whose work is in process, or you're just dreaming of the work you want to do. Anybody that's interested in it, we want to talk to you and talk together. It's also different because the last phase there's 3 phases, and the last phase is we're going to work on projects together. We create a space where we can actually do something together and plan it and get it started. So I'm really excited about that work. I also want to remind you that those of you that, and Jamila, you too, Dr. Khadija Ali Coleman and I, as part of our BFHES work, we have a book series, and your dissertations and theses can become a book that go into the series. It's Contemporary Perspectives on Black Homeschooling, and it's with the Information Age publishers, and they will distribute it widely. Dr. Ali Coleman and I would be your editors and help you get that baby published. So, remember that if you want to publish your work when it's finished. And let's see, where is it? I want to thank you all. Yes, thank you all for coming and being and sharing your time with us.